All right, Cougs fans, we are ready to kick off the basketball season in a real way. We're playing a Power 5 team coming in. Wait, Oregon lost to who?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach, Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a hater or just a U of H, if you're a U of H fan, I should say, or just a hater can't stop by, please be sure to hit subscribe down below for the latest on all things Cougs each day. We'll pop up on your news feed each day that way, and you'll be able to make Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Welcome to the YouTube channel. We are about a week into this thing. Be sure to subscribe and get all those kinds of things. We're giving out a Marcus Sasser t-shirt, a lot like the one I have on for this preview. It's a really, really cool, comfy fit, nice, boxy, big fit. It is available to all on Instagram. We'll get into all that later. But at 250 subscribers, we're going to give one away. So subscribe. And if you comment on videos, you got a chance to win a t-shirt, to do all those things. If you can't think of something, to say or do or whatever, the question of the day is, do you like thick or thin crust pizza? So today we're getting ready for this Oregon basketball game. And I think that it's an exciting game. It's kind of a test of two different styles. Houston comes in with this guard play and is looking to have a big impact win to start the season. Oregon has kind of had some stumbles out the gates, and I wasn't really sure how to talk about it. So I went and grabbed Spencer from Locked On Ducks, and Spencer's going to help us out with talking about it for a little bit today. And it's time to bring him in right now. All right, so that's Spencer. That's me. Welcome, Spencer, to Locked On Cougs. How are you doing today? It's Sunday where you are these days. That's a little bit different time zone. You doing all right?
I'm on Maui time, so island life, island time, whatever you want to call it. It's good to me right now, and it's good to be on with you, Parker. And I love this time of year. The college football, basketball crossover. Inject me with all of
it. Yeah, it's something every night. Something every night. Every night being this Sunday night, right? Obviously, college teams like ourselves thinking about Saturdays for the weekend, but Sunday we have a big basketball matchup between the listener and I, our Houston Cougars, and your Oregon Ducks. So I had to have you on to talk me through the Oregon Ducks. First of all, Spencer, can you tell us, as the host of Locked On Ducks, how's the season gone so far?
I'm hoping I can just say we're only 3 games in, and that will, cure the ills that they've got right now. I had pretty high hopes for this team coming into this year. They had a disappointing 20-win campaign a season ago, which is a pretty high-level problem to have. A lot of programs, Oregon State, for instance, would kill to have a 20-win season and get to the NIT. There are plenty of other, Cal, Washington State, go up and down the list. But for Oregon, the standard with Dana Altman has been set higher, and they didn't meet that standard a year ago. Despite having more talent than their record showed, they just were never able to put it all together. And unfortunately, some of the issues we saw last year reared their head in an ugly way against UC Irvine, and they didn't lose to the Anteaters, Parker. They got trounced at home, and that's not good. Now, UC Irvine is a respectable program. They're a respectable program. They've been in the tournament before. You shouldn't lose that game at home. You shouldn't get worked in that game at home, but Oregon did, and that was discouraging. I mean, they had a preseason top 25 ranking. I think that was deserved. They brought back a lot of talent from last year. They added some good talent in the transfer portal. Dana Altman's a great coach. I think that was an appropriate ranking to be number 21, but they just didn't live up to it. And now it has me worried going into this game with Houston, because before the season, I would have thought, man, I think if you can win that game, be 4-1 through your first 5, gosh, you'd be looking really, really good, or maybe go 5-0. But it's a big opportunity for the Ducks to turn around their season early in their season rather than later. Dana Altman's teams have had a tendency to play really, really well late in the year, but kind of struggle to find their footing early in the season. I'm hoping this will be an opposite campaign, but based on that game against UC Irvine, I'm not optimistic.
Well, and so I gotta be honest. The Houston Cougars and myself, we're all hoping that y'all beat these teams by a bunch of points, so that way beating you on Sunday look better. No, I have to say the first tweet I saw about the Oregon Irvine game was actually, and this is a basketball audience, from Mark Stein. He's a noted Southern California himself and pointed it out for the entire world to see. So I'm sure that helped out. Oregon, as you mentioned, had higher hopes this season. They've got big names, a few big name freshmen, and I guess big is the operative word. They're like some pretty big kids. The listener and I don't know as much about the Ducks. So talk us through who's on campus this year.
Well, let's start with the guys who are not going to be playing in this game, and that's Brennan Rigsby, who Dana Altman has hinted that he might have been a regular player. I'm not totally sure about that. He might have played, but I don't think he would have been a starter. But no Jermaine Couisnard, and that, hard to say because he's never taken the court for the Ducks, but he's a good player at South Carolina a year ago, and he is someone who I fully expected to start coming into the season, and he's out with an injury for the time being. And maybe when he comes back, that can provide a spark. You got Will Richardson there for year 5 in an Oregon Duck uniform. He's starting to become a very polarizing player. I think what you have to realize with Will Richardson is he is a good college basketball player. His career numbers indicate that. You watch him and he sometimes disappears, but when he's on, he's really, really good. But he's a 2. Some guys are assistant coaches or coordinators, not head coaches. Some guys are VPs, not presidents. And Will Richardson at his best, when he has played his best basketball for the most part in his Oregon career, he's been the number 2. Like the team that he was heavily involved with as a scorer and as a point guard was a Sweet 16 team. But Chris Duarte was the number 1. And you also had Eugene Omarui. So Richardson sometimes was the 2, sometimes was the 3, and I think he's being asked to be the leader here. He's not a real vocal guy. He's pretty quiet, and he's not that dominant athletically. He is 6'4", 6'5", so he's a big point guard, really physical, streaky shooter, very streaky shooter. When he's hot, it looks like a hula hoop to him shooting the ball at the basket. But when he's cold, it looks like he's trying to fit that orange rock into a golf hole. So there's a lot of come and go with his game. And I think offensively, Oregon has, kind of lived and died by the 3 over the last couple of seasons. When they're hitting their threes, they can be a top 10 team in the country. When they're not hitting their threes, they are a bottom 30 team in college basketball. It feels, I don't know how else you explain getting worked by UC Irvine. They shot it very poorly in that game. So there's such a high ceiling on this team, and there was last year too, but we just continue to realize as well the floor is really, really low. And Will Richardson's a guy that if Houston shuts him down, there isn't really a clear guy ready to fill that role. It should be Quincy Guerrier, but it hasn't been consistently, and he again is probably best served to be a complementary player. So those are the 2 guys who figure to lead the way offensively when they're not force-feeding N'Faly Dante almost to a fault, but his injury status makes him up in the air basically week in and week out at this point. But those are the guys. And then the big 5-star freshman, Kello Ware, very early in his career. And so far, his minutes are playing out exactly like I thought they would when he committed to the Ducks back in the spring. I said, this guy is really tall. He's really athletic. He's really big. I think he'll be a really good player, but I bet you he doesn't start right away, even though I would like to see him start. And I bet you his playing time increases more and more as the season goes on, because he was playing high school basketball in Little Rock, Arkansas. Parker, nobody lives there, right? So there's just not that many people. So the level of competition, it doesn't change the fact that he's incredibly physically gifted. But there's going to be more of an adjustment for him playing at the Power 5 Division I level than what he played against in high school, as opposed to someone who plays at Mater Dei, Montverde, those sorts of big name high school brands. By the way, you should take that hat off and throw it in the fire. But I just noticed it for the first time. We're 7 minutes in, and I just noticed it. But I think you should park it anyway. But he had a really good game against Montana State. Again, not the most physically imposing opponent. So, I think it still remains to be seen how far his development has come along to this point. But the more that he gets involved, the more likely Oregon can have a successful season and get back to the NCAA tournament.
Well, and hat aside, although I have to say my World Series hadn't come in yet, so maybe I'll get the next one. I will say I think the interesting thing with Kelvin Ware as a Houston guy is that he's the McDonald's All-American y'all have. Our McDonald's All-American looks a little bit different. He's a 6'8", perimeter, like he's built like an ox, Jarace Walker, but he's a perimeter guy. He did do the IMG Academy thing. And so like they're very, very different. They're both McDonald's All-American kind of good, but very, very different paths. And you don't typically see Jarace Walker from the IMG Academy end up at Houston the same kind of way you might not see a Little Rock, Arkansas kid end up at Oregon, right? I don't think it's a very normal path. Houston's strength, though, has been their guard play thus far. Both on defensive and offensive ends, it's been their guard play. How would you – and then, like, they have scrappy guys on the inside. How do you think that's going to match up with your Ducks? Is that kind of playing into y'all's hands, or how would you say that's going to work out?
That depends on which Oregon team shows up. Because if Oregon's guards, particularly Will Richardson, play at their best, yeah, they can go toe-to-toe with Houston's guards, even though Houston's probably a little bit better at that position overall. But Oregon can at least be competitive. But where the Ducks have their greatest strength is in the front court. And Nate Biddle's a name to watch for to see if he has 10 or more points again. He's done so in 2 of the 3 games this year for the Ducks. He's kind of that stretch 4 who comes off the bench, might start if N'Faly Dante, who full disclosure status, I haven't double checked on. He went down last game. I can look it up here real quick for everybody. But Nate Biddle and Kelvin Ware and N'Faly Dante, these are big dudes. These are big guys. Dane Altman's had a lot of success with big men. Think of Jordan Bell, Kenny Wooten, Chris Boucher. You go down the list, there have been a lot of really good players in the front court. And I think if Houston is going to shoot the ball very well, they'd be well suited to not go into the paint because those guys are erasers. Biddle, a little more offensively oriented, but Kelvin Ware and especially N'Faly Dante, if he's playing, they will erase shots at the rim. And I think the guard matchup is really interesting. I've got faith in Oregon's bigs, but I just question what we're going to see from the Ducks on the perimeter.
Excuse me. Well, I do think it's interesting that I can't find a Vegas underdog here. Houston is ranked 3rd in the country. And so I'd imagine that, that probably means Oregon is not the betting favorite, although they're at home. And this episode is brought to us by Underdog Fantasy, which is the easiest place to spice up college football. And so I know this is a basketball episode, but I got to ask you a football question to spice it up a little bit. Underdog Fantasy has the over-under on passing yards for Utah's quarterback against your Oregon Ducks. Utah quarterback Cameron Rising plays the Oregon Ducks this Saturday. Little late-night Pac-12 action, Pac-12 After Dark. They've got him set at 244.5 passing yards. As a Ducks guy, their defense. Would you say Cameron Rising and Utah, strong Utah team this year, should be over the top of that, or would you go underneath that?
Okay, that's a fascinating number. And just to follow up on what I touched on a moment ago, it looks like Dante will be okay to play. I hope they don't force feed him too much offensively. He's good, but shouldn't have as many touches as he's maybe been getting. Got to get the perimeter guys a little more involved. That number is a reflection of the philosophy Kyle Whittingham and the Utes employ to try to win football games. Because if they wanted to, Cam Rising is a good enough quarterback to be way over 300 yards in this game. But I think what Underdog is telling you is that they are really committed to the run, and they're going to stay committed to the run, even if it's not working particularly well against a stout Oregon run defense, because the Oregon pass defense stinks. I mean, it is bad. And so I'm shocked it's only 244, but to me that says Vegas knows something. So I would take the under there because I thought that over-under would be 275, 280. But the fact that they set it there, to me, tells me they know something about how the game might play out or what Oregon or Utah are going to try to do. Oregon might be playing with a backup quarterback, so they could be running the ball a lot in this game. I think you do take the under, as crazy as it sounds. Oregon's pass defense has been abysmal this year, but just based on the number, I think I'd go under.
Interesting. So you're reading it as so low, something must be afoot, right?
Yeah,
that's
100%. I think Penix's over-under was over 300 yards, and he went over he had over 400 last week. So the fact that you went from allowing a 400-yard passer to now the over-under for the opposing team's quarterback, who's a reigning first-team All-Pac-12 performer, is only at 244. Vegas knows something, and Vegas is rarely wrong.
Vegas really long. So you heard it from the Ducks guy himself to go under that number that feels so low. Make sure you sign up promo code Locked On, all one word, and Underdog will double your deposit up to $100. That's deposit $100, get $100 for free. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com or find the Underdog Fantasy app in the App Store or Google Play Store. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code Locked On. Get in the college football pick'em action today. All right, so this is a basketball matchup. Switching gears back to basketball. This is a again, guard heavy team, big heavy team. You don't sound very confident or kind of wary on the first 3 games of your Ducks so far. So let's say this thing goes south. What's on the line for your Ducks? What would this mean for your Ducks that woke up Monday after a game that doesn't go their way on Sunday night?
It's a chance for them to turn their season around in the early going. Is the season over if they lose? No, it is not. There's a long way to go in the college basketball season. But if you're Oregon thinking about getting back to the NCAA tournament, you don't want to have quality wins on your resume, right? Particularly out of conference. And though it's early in the season, these sorts of wins don't get forgotten the way college football early season wins sometimes do, because Houston is going to be really good this year. It's a much more predictable sport than college football in terms of you play a ranked team, they're probably going to be good later in the year. Not always for sure, but it's much more predictable, I think, because you have so much more time for the season to play out. And Houston would be a game that Oregon one day could look back on and say, boy, we're trying to get like a 6 seed, but maybe we could get a 5, got that win against Houston. That could be a quad 1 win by the time the year comes to an end. But it's more important than that for the Ducks. They need something to galvanize the locker room. They showed energy. They showed fight against Montana State, and they trounced them by 30, which is exactly what you should do. And that was encouraging to see. But if you do it against this quality of an opponent, I think it'll reinstill a real sense of belief, not just in the locker room, but outside of it as well, that, yeah, this team can be really good and they have a lot of talent. They're missing several scholarship players right now with injury. So if you get this win without them, I think by the time they return, it'll exaggerate in a good way that reinvigoration of, what the Ducks could become. And by the time they get back, they look and say, hey, here's what we did without these guys. Now that they are back, here's what we are capable of.
Well, and Spencer, that's exact. You mentioned them having several guys down. That's almost why it feels weirdly like a must win for the Cougs night, right? Like we played Texas Southern, an HBCU, on Wednesday, and Texas Southern wins the SWAC a lot of the time. But I posted a whole yeah, we beat Texas Southern, we're 4-0, and I legitimately had people coming at me like, oh, big deal, it's Texas Southern. Like it's like playing poorly against Oregon when they're down guys is almost going to be this indictment on group of 5 basketball in a way that I'm not sure is fair. So it does feel like a must win for us in a lot of ways. And I kind of feel a little bit of pressure. Do you feel any pressure as a Ducks person heading in? You got injuries. Like you said, it's early in the season.
I'm still nervous about it because it's such a big opportunity and they don't have too many of these on their non-conference slate, and then league play begins really, really quickly. And so if they can at least, I don't need Oregon to win this game to feel optimistic about how the season will go. I need Oregon to be competitive in this game. If it's what it was against Baylor last year, which was a close loss at home, you show the potential. And then Oregon showed flashes of it in the regular season, but then they had a bunch of letdowns. They lost to Arizona State twice. They lost to Cal. They lost to Washington. And all those teams were under 500 last year. Like, it was just inexplicable. But they also beat USC and UCLA at a time when the Bruins and Trojans, they beat them in the same week when they were ranked in the top 5. And Oregon went on the road and beat them both. So if they can be competitive in this game, then I'll look at it and say, hey, I know the flashes are there. I know the potential is there. Now I just need to see it the way I did last year without the big letdowns. Oregon is a tournament team last year if they don't have major letdowns. If they can just beat Cal, Arizona State, Washington State. Like, you didn't need to beat UCLA again. You didn't need to beat USC again. You just needed to beat them once. You just needed to get a split. You got the split with the LA schools who were both top 7 seeds a year ago. And then you throw in some other quality opponents in the Pac-12, and look, you're not going to win every game. But if Oregon can just avoid those major letdowns, but also show that they're capable of playing with a high-level team like Houston, then I'll walk away feeling optimistic. So not a must win, but a must play well.
So last question, super important question. I know
Yeah.
you guys have the Phil Knight stuff coming up later. I guess that's actually later this month. It's only mid-November. Um, are as a school known for uniforms, is there going to be something flashy on the court for the Sunday night big preseason game, or are you saving that stuff for later in the season?
I don't think they save anything for anything. I mean, they've got so many different options, and I mean, they will roll it out at any point in time. When they take the court, they usually look really good.
Fair enough. They're going to look really good. Spencer's the place to hear about them. Spencer, tell us where people find your stuff, you, etc.
At Smalls_55 is my personal Twitter handle, and then I host Locked On Ducks, just like Locked On Cougs, 5 days a week, your daily Oregon Ducks podcast. And then I also host Locked On Pac-12. So if you want coverage of everybody in the Pac-12, understand what's going on over there. We haven't quite transitioned over to basketball yet. It's all football content right now because football is juicy, like a properly cooked medium rare filet. And I think that is something you should check out if you're interested in hearing about everything going on over there. But Parker, it's great to be on with you, man, and hopefully it's a great game. I mean, that's what I want most of all, because it could so easily, if Oregon shows up and lays an egg, they could just lose by 25 or 30. And I'd love to look up and see, like, hey, lost by 7, had a lead with 5 minutes to go. Houston came back, took it from them. I'd be okay with that.
I'm okay with that too. We'll win by 7. We'll call it even. Take care, Spencer.
All right, see you, man.
All right, so it was fun to get to joke with Spencer. I love that 7-point win. I don't mean to spoil Spencer's parade. I'm going to predict a little bit more. I'm going into the double digits, but less than 20. I think Houston's defense is suffocating. I think this is going to be like a 68-52 kind of game, right? I think that's going to be kind of what we're looking at here. I think Jamal Shead will shut down some of the perimeter stuff. I tend to hedge on guards in college basketball, and so I kind of feel like the fact that Houston's got the more dominant guard play, as much as Spencer told us all about the bigs, is going to be kind of important in the course of this basketball game. Now, you can talk to myself all game long. You can find me on Twitter, assuming Twitter still exists, at Painsworth512. That's PAINSWORTH 512. I'm talking all things Cougs, Rockets, Astros, whatever. I got sneakers, man. We can talk sneakers all you want. We can talk about the Texans if you want, but they kind of suck. So we'll just not talk about the Texans, please. Anyway, whatever you want to talk about, find me at Painsworth512, PAINSWORTH 512. Now, that's all the time we've got today for this bonus episode. If you have not heard about the Eastern Carolina preview, go check us out at the more traditional episode that also came out at the exact same time today. Make sure you make Locked On Cougs your first listen and sometimes potentially second listen as well. For a second listen, I'm going to recommend Locked On Rockets. Jackson Gatlin does a great job with that show. Rockets just beat the Mavs a couple nights ago on Wednesday night. I think they're having a good time over there, so go enjoy that one as well. Thank you all so much. Locked On Cougs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Go Cougs.